G'day, welcome to One Nerd's Workshop. I made some of these keepsake boxes for some friends who helped me out recently. The box is made of walnut and has a drawer inside. The drawer front is made from walnut and the rest of the drawer parts are made from European beech. It also has a brass rod for the drawer pull. In this video, I'm going to show you how I made the box. Stick around. I started milling up some stock, but that's pretty boring, so I'm not going to show you too much of that. The box corners are mitred, so I tilt my table saw blade to 45 degrees and then cut the corners using a miter sled. Unfortunately, you can't see it in the video, but the top left corner of the edge is aligned with the left hand side of the slot for the blade in the back fence. This method should not change the length of the side. I like to remove any blade marks from the mitred corners and fine-tune the length of the pairs of the box sides using my miter shooting board. I'm colouring in the end of each short side with a white pencil, and I know that the edge has been shot once the white pencil has been removed. The two short sides are placed back to back once they have been shot and fine-tune their length on the shooting board. I go back to the shooting board if they are different lengths, but I got lucky this time. I repeat the process with the long sides. The back of the box floats in a groove that runs around all four sides. I cut the groove using the ripping blade on my table saw. You could use a crosscut or combination blade instead, but my flat tooth ripping blade gives a nice flat groove, which I prefer. I like to pre-finish the interior of the box using shellac to help protect the sides and keep them clean. The first thing I do is plane the inside faces to remove dirt, pencil marks and scratches. I have masked the miters so that the shellac does not seal them and prevent the glue bonding. I do this before glue up because with some projects it can be very difficult to do so afterwards. I don't think that I would get good coverage if I did it later in this case. I will wax the insides later to help the drawer slide easily. I find that using painter's tape makes for quick and accurate clamps for mitred boxes. The joints want to pull themselves together naturally, so there is a lot less fiddling around making sure the box is square. Sometimes the tape doesn't stick properly, so I use a glue roller to press the tape onto the timber. Then I insert the back to check the fit and put tape on the final corner when I am happy. The shellac I applied earlier helps with removing glue squeeze out, but I only apply enough glue to keep the box together to minimise the amount of cleanup I have to do later. I use more tape as clamps as it is quick and easy to apply. Any glue squeeze out is easily removed at this stage. The drawer parts, except the front, are made from European beech. I can get them all out of a small piece cut from a larger board. I use my compound miter saw to cut the board for the drawer parts from the long European beech board. Here you're getting a good view of my left elbow. Then it's off to the jointer and thicknesser to clean up the rough board, ready for resawing the parts to a little over the required thickness of 10mm. I have a 19mm 3 TPI bimetal blade in my bandsaw, and I find it does a pretty good job of resawing European beech. I probably go too slowly when resawing, but I am trying to let the blade do the work rather than forcing the timber through the saw. I find it easier and safer to pull the timber through the last part of the cut rather than trying to push it through. I have installed a splitter this time, even though kickback is unlikely. I now check that the gripper does not hit the blade, because one day I forgot to do so and you can see the damage on the movable piece. The good thing is that it was the gripper that got damaged rather than me, but it was a silly bit of carelessness on my behalf. There are lots of parts to cut, so I won't bore you by making you watch that. They were all cut to length on the table saw, using my Incremiter fence for accuracy. I like making piston fit drawers, so I started preparing the drawer parts for the joinery by shooting the front and back to fit the opening of the box. The idea is to have a very tight fit so that you can plane the sides of the drawer down to provide a nice back and forth motion with no play from side to side. I was unable to achieve that due to some errors that I make when laying out the dovetails, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Start by fitting the height of the drawer front. I do this by taking a few light shavings on the top or bottom, then testing the fit. I repeat this until the drawer front slides into the opening at both ends. I use the drawer front to accurately mark out the back and then fit it as well. Then I move on to the drawer sides. I want the drawer sides to be tight to the top and the bottom, so I use my shooting board to bring them down to size.
Too much.
It's been some time since I cut my last set of dovetails, so the results could be interesting to say the least. I used to rotate the board so that the saw line was vertical to make cutting to the line easier, but over time I learned how to angle the blade in either direction while keeping the board perpendicular to the bench. Now I have to remove the waste that will be filled with the half pin. I like to create a knife wall to guide the saw by using a chisel to remove some of the waste up to the knife line. This gives me a flat surface to guide the saw against. The sides of the dovetails were a little rough, so I cleaned them up with my chisel. My sawing technique has deteriorated, and I did not do a good job of some of the cuts. The angle of the dovetail sides matter, but are not critical at this stage, because the pins are cut to fit the tails. But taking the time to clean up the dovetail sides pays off in the long run. I use a small square to check for flatness. Keep safety in mind when you are chiseling, making small controlled cuts, using your thumb and forefinger as brakes. This will help to reduce the chance of overshooting with the chisel and cutting yourself. The camera positioning is not as good as I'd like, and I'll do my best to talk you through what's happening. The pins of the half-blind dovetails in the drawer front are marked out and cut next. I'm using regular masking tape and a marking knife to mark out the waste, which I'll cut out using a dovetail saw. I'm using the block plane as a support for the draw side while I do the marking out. I'm raising the draw front so that it is level with the block plane, using my fingers to make sure they are level. You could use a straight edge, but I find that my sensitive touch is more than sufficient for the task. The draw side is placed in position on the draw front, and a square is used to ensure that it is aligned correctly. The marking knife is used to cut the masking tape, and it is critical that the draw side does not move while that is occurring. You gotta love the back of the hand cam. I'm such a professional. Once the tail is marked out, the masking tape is removed to reveal the waste to be removed. Rinse and repeat for the other side. The thickness of the draw sides is now marked onto the ends of the draw fronts, so I know how much waste to remove. I use a wheel gauge and the side of the draw to set the depth of the dovetails. The tape on the ends of the draw front causes the sides to be slightly proud of the draw front, but I'll plane them flush after glue up. Eagle-eyed viewers will note that the wheel gauge slightly dislodged the tape, so I should have done this step before removing the tape from the waste. I started cutting the sides of the dovetails in the draw front, but found it difficult to see the knife line for the depth. I put some masking tape on the line to help me see when to stop. Remove the waste using a sharp chisel. I do most of this with a workpiece clamped to the bench, but move to the vise to clean up the sloping sides of the tail sockets. I will move back and forth between the bench and the vise until the job is done. When I get close to having the bottom of the tail socket clean, I start to use the bench top as a reference for flatness. I want to have the bottom of the tail socket flat or slightly undercut so that the draw front sits flat in the socket. Some people say that you shouldn't undercut the joint, but I think it doesn't matter too much provided that the undercut is very shallow. My preference is to have it flat, but I didn't achieve that with this project, so more practice is required. I wanted to mark out the centre holes for the draw pulls before I glued the box together, because it is easier to get the draw front into the drill press than the whole draw. Here I'm marking out the vertical centre line of the draw front. Then I'll mark out the centre lines for the drill holes relative to the centre of the draw front. This ensures that the draw pull is centred across the width of the draw front. Now I'm marking out the centre point of the actual holes. An awl is used to mark the centre points. Some peanut forgot to record the drilling of the mounting holes in the drawer front, so I can't show you that happening. I like to finish the inside faces of the drawer components because it helps to keep dirt out over the drawer's life. I use a couple of light coats of shellac and have to mask off the joinery surfaces because the shellac will stop the glue adhering. The shellac also makes cleaning up after the glue up easier because the dried glue simply pops off. I don't tend to use clamps when gluing up dovetail drawers. My reasoning for this is that the dovetails should be tight enough that they are not needed. They were for the most part in this project, but you can see where I made a mistake when cleaning up the waste at the end of the drawer front. This is not a big deal for these small drawers, but I'll show you how I fix that gap in a later video. I check for squareness using a measuring tape once the drawer has been assembled, and make adjustments before leaving the glue to dry.
291. Just a bee's dick. 291.5. 291.5.
Now it's time to start work on the drawer slips. The blank is thickness to size. Each drawer slip has a groove which the drawer bottom slides in. I cut this using a thin curved combination blade and then size the drawer bottom to fit. For safety, I'm cutting the grooves for all drawer slips from a single larger board and will rip the slips to size later on the bandsaw. Prefer to use the bandsaw to rip small parts because I feel that it is safer than the table saw. Unfortunately, elbow cam reappeared. I was concentrating so much on making the drawer slips that I forgot to record me cutting the tongue that inserts into the drawer front. Not only that, I cut the tongue on the wrong end, so the damn things were glued in upside down. I discovered it after I stopped recording and had to fix the mistake then and there. So here I am, gluing in the drawer slips upside down. I didn't want to get any glue squeeze out at the top of the drawer slip, so I only applied glue to the bottom 2/3 and on the tongue. You can see that they are upside down in this shot. The thick side next to the groove should be on the bottom so that it can be planed flush with the bottom of the drawer. The slips would not be able to support the drawer bottom properly if they weren't taken off and installed correctly. The drawer slips have been installed correctly, so now it's time to test fit the drawer bottom. I'm using a shoulder plane to finesse the tongue and taking a few shavings, then checking the fit. Rinse and repeat until it fits. I had to take it over to my shooting board to finish cleaning up. The back will be trimmed to size later.
Okay. Good.
I gave the drawer bottom a light sand on both sides to remove any marks and then pre-finished it using shellac. Glue is applied to the bottom side of the tongue so that it goes into the drawer front, and the bottom is pushed into place. The blocks for the drawer pulls have not been cut from the timber blank to make it easier for drilling the mounting holes. I use a wheel gauge to centre the hole on the mounting blocks. I used a small drill press vise to hold the timber blank while I drill the holes. I haven't used a vise previously, but I'm wanting to improve the safety of my work habits, so I have started using it. The depth stop on my drill press is not very accurate, so I use my digital calipers to confirm the depth is correct. I wanted the edges of the mounting blocks to have a chamfer, so I did this using the chisel. The drawer pull is fairly simple, and assembling it is pretty straightforward. The brass rod is press fit into the holes in the mounting blocks. I am wearing gloves because I don't want to tarnish the polished brass rod. Sanding the box before finishing was not a time-consuming task, because I had already hand-planed the surfaces prior to glue-up. This meant that I only needed to give the box a light sanding. I normally use a wipe-on finish, but wanted to experiment with rattle can lacquer on this project. I carefully masked off the parts I didn't want finish on, and then sprayed on several coats of lacquer. The bottom of the box was done later. You can't see it, but I'm wearing a mask and have a fan blowing the fumes away from me so that I wouldn't breathe them in. I applied 3 coats of finish and gave the box a light sanding between each coat. This is how the box turned out after all that work. Well, I hope you found that interesting and that you learned something from it. Check out the playlist to the right for other videos that you might find interesting as well. If you like this type of content, please like and subscribe to the channel, and this will help YouTube share it with others. If you'd like to support me financially, you can do so via Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee, or through PayPal me. I have provided links in the description below. Thanks for watching. Have a wonderful day.